Hello, everyone, and welcome to this video-based conversation between myself and Ben about how to frame AI risk strategies for broad audience. I am supposed to be the executive director of Inferential Insights, or president of Inferential Insights, an organization that promotes rational thinking and effective giving for broad audience to build an altruistic and flourishing world. And I'll give Benjamin then a chance to introduce himself and ask the first question that we wanted to ask him about how to frame AI risk strategies for broad audience effectively. Please go ahead, Ben.
Hello, I'm Ben Garfinkel. I am a member.
I just want to mention Ben's camera isn't working, so it will just be me on camera and you'll hear Ben's voice in the background. Go ahead.
Great. Hi, I'm Ben Garfinkel. I'm a member of the Global Politics of Artificial Intelligence Research Group, which is currently based out of both Yale and Oxford. And I'm involved in a project at the moment related to effective communication of AI risk. And so I guess I'll start off. So before diving into specifically the topic of how one can effectively frame AI risk to people in other adjacent fields, such as political science, I suppose sort of ask more generally whether there are any good general insights that you have with regards to presenting new and possibly slightly weird sounding topics to people in a way that catches their attention and potentially leads them to actually change their mind and integrate them into their thinking.
Excellent. So yes, so this is an important topic in AI, rationality, effective altruism. These are all kind of weird topics and somewhat unusual. AI being more weird than the other ones somewhat, but still same principles, same ideas. Presenting a new idea and getting people to internalize it and change their thinking, their feelings, and their behaviors as a result of doing so. So the first thing to remember is that it's crucial to connect to people's existing knowledge. So think about what people's existing knowledge is, what they already know, and how to connect to their current existing knowledge. So that's fundamental. So where are they now, and where do you want to lead them to, and how do you get them from where they are now to where you want them to lead to? Don't start with where you want to lead them. Start always with where your audience is. And then you can lead them to where you want them to be. Now, as you're leading them to where you want them to be, you want to think about the concept of inferential distance, which is fundamentally important. Inferential distance is the distance between where you want them to be eventually and where they currently are. So that's the distance. And what you want to do is any new information that you present, you want to cross the gap. You want to make the inferential distance as small as possible. So think about the whole distance that you want them to travel and break it up into many, many small chunks. And then give them information that will slowly traverse this distance from where they are now to where you want them to go. That's a fundamental thing to think about. Where are they now? Where do you want them to go? Give them a chunk of information that's closest to where they are now. And now they've traveled a little bit of the way to where you want them to go. Give them the next chunk. And now they've traveled a little bit more. Give them the next chunk. And now they've traveled a little bit more. So that's the way to lead people along from where they currently are now to where you want them to go. So that's one thing to think about, the inferential distance. A second thing to think about is emotions. People change their thinking based on emotions. So it's really very important to appeal to people's emotions when you're talking to a broad audience. Even when you're speaking to a more serious audience, you want to think about their emotions, what they care about, what's emotionally salient to them. Now, there are some people, academics and so on, and research people who care about data, science, evidence. it's still emotions. These are still things they care about. So these are things you would want to present if you're speaking to academics, if you're speaking to data-driven people for whom that's really important. Now, let's be honest, most people in the world are not data-driven people, they're not academics. They don't really care so much about data, arguments, logic. But remember, you and I and other people who care about AI issues, we are exceptional. We are outliers. And we tend to fall into two forms of cognitive bias. Force of knowledge is one, and typical mind fallacy is another. I'll explain each of these. Force of knowledge means that people who already know something forget how hard it is to learn how to do so. A typical example is riding a car or riding a bike. When you already know how to drive a car or how to ride a bike, you forget how hard it is to learn these things. The same thing for when you know any subject, whether it be accounting or writing, how to write well, how to do accounting well. These are things that people who know them forget how hard it is to learn about them and to engage with them. And the same thing goes for AI, which we'll talk about in a bit. So that's one thing to learn, think about, first of knowledge. It's going to be hard for other people to pay attention to a new idea that you present to them and to learn about. The other one is typical mind fallacy. People who are already concerned with AI and things like this, with complex intellectual things, tend to assume that those people they're speaking to are like them, and the vast majority of people are not. Again, we're outliers. So think about what the majority of the people tend to be interested in. They tend to be interested not in the same things that we are. They tend to not be interested in hard data, hard science, hard evidence. They tend to be interested more in more emotionally salient things, more stories, more narratives. And these are the things that you have to appeal through stories, through narratives, not through hard data, because they don't care about hard data. So, not caring so much about hard data, again, it combines with curse of knowledge, that we think it's easy, but it's not. It took us, even took us, for our outliers efforts to learn and hear about AI safety topics. So combine the effortfulness of learning about a new topic with having to care about it. So you first have to cause people to care about a topic before they will make the effort to learn about it. Most people are not curious. You might be surprised that most people are not. You and I are curious. Other people who are into AI are curious. New information. We want to learn about it. Most people are not. They have to care. So caring is something we have to induce in people for them to learn about a topic, for them to overcome the efforts of learning about a topic. And then presenting information in small chunks that traverses the inferential distance well. So you have to make them care about something and then cross that distance and care about the next piece, cross the distance. Care about the next piece, cross the distance. So the longer the distance, the more they have to care to traverse it, to go over it. So you want to make the distance as short as possible, so that you have to induce a lower level of caring to go through it. Make it emotionally engaging for a topic. And we can talk about strategies for emotional engagement as well, if that's something that would be helpful. But those are the two big points I wanted to make to start. Does that help address your question then?
That was really fantastic. Yeah, extremely helpful. And I think, yes, to turn now, but is more specifically the AI safety, just as a tiny piece of evidence, I'm sure among many, for the idea of inferential steps being important. I guess I'll describe just very briefly. So the group recently ran just a small survey on using Amazon Mechanical Turk to try and see what sort of common framings of AI safety seem to be most effective, at least for a general audience, or at least whatever reproduction of the general audience that the mechanical Turk user base is. And the way it basically worked is we took 10 short one-paragraph descriptions of AI risk across like a fairly broad range. For example, one that uses sci-fi movie scenarios, one which speaks fairly abstractly in terms of optimization algorithms and how it's hard to optimize for certain things compared to other things. Some which compared to pre-existing technological risks like nuclear energy. And we presented groups of about 100 people with each of the prompts, for each of the prompts, about 100 people received it. Then we're asked, how important does AI safety seem to you? How important is it seem that people are working to avoid AI risk scenarios which have been described in the prompts? And then how credible would you imagine that the people working in this field are? And the interesting thing that we found is the most effective of the 10 prompts we had was in fact the only one that didn't present any sort of evidence or didn't present any sort of argument. All it does is it merely asks people to think for themselves, by what year do they think they would be around a 50-50 chance that human level AI would exist? And to think for themselves 3 possible large scale impacts of human level AI. And that's all it does. It doesn't present any sort of any quote from Stephen Hawking or any common argument or any fact about artificial intelligence. It just does that. And that was actually more effective at getting people to say that AI safety is important than all of the other attempts, which really stood out to all of us and seems to, I would imagine, be explicable in terms of the idea of inferential steps. So just quickly on whether that seems the right inference or whether that seems surprising to you all.
I think here it is explicable in terms of inferential steps, because what you asked people to do was imagine stories of what would happen. And people tend to, when they're asked to imagine things, they imagine these stories to themselves about what might happen, what would be the case, and so on. And then the stories often have, so there's a human phenomenon which is called loss aversion, and people who think about losses, who think about the future, they tend to, in general, be more oriented toward avoiding loss than oriented toward gain. So they think about human level AI, they would tend to think about what they would lose as a result, as opposed to what they would gain. And that would be more scary and more salient for them. So it's a combination of connecting to their current information that they already know about AI and human level AI, and then they would that connects. And we're asking them to create losses, to create stories, and those stories hopefully combined with loss aversion to make this issue somewhat second. Obviously, that would be a effective strategy. I think other effective strategies. So this is kind of, you're asking me, like, you gave me information and you're asking me to look at it and work backward from there. So it's easy to explain or rationalize this information about what would be effective. I think other things that would be effective would be to give people stories that they are not currently thinking about. And that might be more effective than asking them to come up with stories. So there are people who tend to be more optimistic around AI stuff and would not necessarily think of negative stories. But if you find them with a negative story that sounds really realistic, that would be something that people would be concerned about. So, for example, one easy way to do so would be to talk about, instead of saying, when would human level AI come about? That would be one question in the survey. Another question could be, think about the job losses that would come out, what result from a human level AI, and then compare that to the question about just think about human level AI. I would be quite highly willing to make a bet that the question about job losses from human level AI would produce more concern and salience for people. In whatever measure we're using to measure salience, people would be more concerned about the risk from AI as a result from that than they would be just asking about something like thinking about human level AI.
That's interesting. I think also another sort of an interesting aspect of AI risk, which makes it, in some sense, uniquely tricky, is it's a topic which there are already, in some sense, lots and lots of stories with which people are already very familiar, and with lots of emotion attached to them. Where obviously, we're not for want of, Terminator and all of these things. And it's also a topic which I think there's also a baseline of emotion for it as well, at least in terms of concern about job losses. And then, of course, stories people tend to tell about AI in Hollywood tend to be pretty dramatic and grim. What's sort of interesting is if you think that it definitely seems like there's a bit of a pitfall in presenting narratives about here's the sort of possibly specific way in which AI may cause substantial harm, in a sense that on the one hand it's essentially very engaging. On the other hand, it could also set up sort of alarms in people's heads of the field being overly associated with storytelling, and specifically sort of sci-fi, sci-fi stories. So I'd be interested if you have any thoughts generally about. There seems to be some sort of tension in that storytelling is extremely useful for communicating ideas, but specifically in this case, it seems like storytelling could also raise alarms in people's heads due to its association with sci-fi and all of that.
Yeah, so I totally agree about the interest in associating AI with sci-fi. Well, not symbiote. So the stories that need to be told are ones that are real, and ones that are connected to really existing events, likely events, things that people don't see in the movies. For example, a meaty story to tell would be about the self-driving cars, and asking people to think about, here's the self-driving cars, and who do you think it will put out of business, put out of a job in the next 5 or 10 years? Then asking people to extrapolate from that and say, imagine there's human level AI. Who do you think that would put out of a job after it's there? So connecting it to reality, connecting stories to reality, and asking people to come up with stories by themselves based on reality and not based on sci-fi stuff. Stories are the fundamental way in which humans understand reality. And the stories we tell ourselves, the ways we think, they're narrativized. And there's a lot of research showing that we understand reality through narratives, through asking ourselves why and explaining to ourselves why. Regardless of whether the why is a true why or not. There's some good information about this in the Black Swan by Taylor, about how humans are set up to be narrative-seeking animals, and we tend to always ask the question why and accept the explanation that's offered that seems convenient. So we, as popularizers, we need to know that this is how humans operate. This is how we ourselves operate. And this is how other humans operate. Now, the fact that humans operate this way means that we can either let random narratives influence people, or we can use strategic, intentional narrative telling, storytelling, to influence them in ways that are going to be beneficial for society, that are going to make a positive social impact. So the question that we should be asking ourselves is, how can we frame narratives and how can we restrict these narratives in such a way as to make a beneficial impact, in this case, around AI?
Thank you. I think sort of on a related note, sort of an interesting issue with decisions about how to frame AI risk is there are obviously different levels of severity of the sort of risk people concern themselves with. There's, at the very small scale, there's issues that receive like a actually decent amount of popular press related to what happens if a self-driving car kills someone, or I suppose the recent case. There's more substantially disruptive, slightly further in the future concerns about, for example, large-scale employment loss. And then on, the very extreme upper end of things, you get levels of concern that people have that reach towards AI being potentially an existential risk for humanity. And sort of, I feel like an interesting phenomenon is that oftentimes people who have very grave concerns about AI, oftentimes make the choice to just focus on much more near-term future ones, or risks which they can essentially point in ways at the beginning of the trend. Like, for example, when people can very easily talk about unemployment because they can point at automation already occurring, and something that is easy to imagine. And when you construct the story about it, there's already sort of a narrative that's based on facts that you can build from. Whereas when you want to present a concern about, for example, AI being on the for extreme end of things, potentially an existential risk, I think this is really the area where there's a great fear of sounding like someone who's read way too much science fiction. And so I guess first thing I want to ask is just sort of generally what you think about the idea of, let's say, people who hold very grave risks about AI, in some sense, at least initially, underselling what their risk is, and in a sense presenting the slightly less grave version of, for example, unemployment loss, as opposed to potentially the more serious things which I think are possible at the beginning of the introduction.
Yeah, I think this is a fundamentally important question. I'm myself quite concerned about the longer-term essentials of AI, and I would never talk about this in a setting that's visibly public, because it presents a large risk of me losing social capital, weirdness points, essentially. And this is a danger, this is a high danger for all communicators around AI. How do you talk about existentialism without sounding weird, without sounding out there? So the goal here for us as people who are concerned about longer-term existentialism is to cross that inference step. So the inference step is a fundamental idea here. The distance from where people are right now, to being concerned about AI impact on unemployment, is relatively short. And you can create an emotionally salient message with narratives that gets people to be concerned about the unemployment risks coming from AI. Unemployment risks is just one example. There are, of course, many other risks that would result from AI. Thing that we can talk about is how would cybersecurity work with AI? What if we have hackers who hack an AI that controls, let's say, roads and something like that, transportation systems, and would undermine those. So there are many things that can be talked about. Not only employment. I'm just using unemployment as one example of things to talk about. But there are many things that can be talked about that would cross that inferential gap and make people concerned about human level AI. Now, once people already have that understanding, they can be graduated slowly to other forms of AI safety issues. And once people have the conception that human level AI is possible and it can cause a lot of harm, then one could graduate to the level of, well, what about superhuman level AI? What about AI becomes more intelligent than human beings? What kind of dangers are there? And so that's the crossing of the inferential gap that's necessary for us to actually communicate these dangers to people. So slowly crossing that inferential gap over time. So the way I would do it if I was trying to communicate about this topic, and this is intentional insights, doesn't focus on that as the mission, but we try to help with this stuff as part of our broader efforts to spread rationality, rational thinking, and effective altruism ideas out there. So what I would do is I would communicate about the first step in the inferential gap, and then through broadcasting these messages, getting them placed in public media, and so on. And I would sign up people to an email listserv who are concerned about this topic. And then for people on the email listserv who already, I know, have stepped into that world of engagement with AI risk, I would start to expose them to other forms of AI risk, slowly building them up to the more complex forms of AI risk that are out there. So that would be the graduated process I would take with people if I was running an organization that was devoted to raising the level of awareness around AI safety.
Yeah. It's also, I think, interesting because it seems like depending on the venue or the target audience, what it means to proceed by inferential steps often mean quite different things. Because, for example, in a one-on-one conversation, it's fairly easy to imagine having a way which kind of slowly builds up, and you ask the person's thoughts, and you slowly get to what your overall gravest concern is. But in, for example, the context of let's say an academic paper, where let's say the context is you'd like to write a paper that presents a certain topic as worthy of consideration, people within a field, and this is the context that you have, and you don't necessarily, let's say it's not a series of papers or something you're slowly building up. You'd like to drop a weird idea into sort of a single document. Do you have any, I guess, advice? Because I'm sure that you run into this quite a bit with advertising campaigns, for how to take advantage of inferential steps in a format where it's in a sense a single shot, or it might be consumed over just a very small amount of time.
Yeah, I think in that case you want to very specifically make that in small steps. So in a conversation, if it goes really well, I can imagine it parsing up the territory, but I think in a paper it would be very hard. Like in an academic article, in any popular article, it would be very hard to traverse the whole range of steps. And remember, academics are going to be, or people, they're going to be looking for things that counteract the perspectives that you want to move forward. So mentions of existential risk would trigger people, would make them emotionally defensive, would make them dismiss the author, or there is a high risk of them dismissing the author as spooky and gloomy and not paying attention to the paper at all. Now, you don't want to show your real concerns in these one-shot filters, because they will get you labeled as a good person, and then you're not able to communicate effectively if you're labeled as a good person. There's a psychological effect called the halo/Holmes effect, where basically if people like you, or that's the halo effect or Holmes effect, if they dislike you, they will dislike everything that you do, or they will like everything that you do. So you have to be very careful about giving people a reason for Holmes effect and for them to dislike you and dislike your argument, because it's very easy for that to happen, for them to just engage with you poorly and not like you. So triggering their sci-fi sense, their sense of like, oh, this guy's crazy, is not a good thing to do. Just don't do it. Unless, of course, the audience is already prepared and they traverse that.
It's interesting, I guess, the somewhat large timescale problem that, because, it definitely seems, in my mind, fairly tractable to get more attention across different communities to the unemployment risks of AI. This seems something which it's really hard to argue against, and it's quite compelling and not all that weird based on experiences that have already been going on and people's knowledge that self-driving cars, for example, you can actually make. But let's say, towards the longer goal of, one day being able to, academically discuss the idea of artificial intelligence being something of existential significance to humanity in an academic setting without, the majority of people outside of the field looking in at it as something bizarre. I don't know if you have sort of any thoughts on the general method of it, because setting down a paper that says, hey, existential risk, pay attention to it, obviously would probably put the majority of people who happen to glance at it off.
Yeah.
So if you happen to have any thoughts on the obviously extremely difficult problem of propagating a weird idea into a field through inferential steps, or how you'd go about a problem like this, where you don't really have a continuous interaction with your audience. So you don't necessarily have in a way you would have with like a relationship with a colleague, where you can at lunch bring up another thing over time. How you use inferential steps in a context like that to eventually be able to discuss the fully weird idea.
Yeah, I hear that. So in terms of academic fields, so we talked about popular stuff. In terms of academic fields, I think it will be good to publish papers on short-term risk, and then note that other people, like, don't say you yourself, but kind of note about, oh, and if you're interested in kind of longer-term risk, here are some other people who talk about this stuff. So directing people's attention to this stuff is a way of doing so, while still seeming credible and not out there, by saying that this is not something I talk about. This is something other people talk about. So if you're interested in that stuff, there's stuff for you to read. That I think would be a good baseline strategy for this fall test. And then you will, given that academics are naturally curious, which is a reason they don't end up reading, some of them will pick up your challenge to read stuff on long-term risks for AI. And that's a good heuristic framework to follow.
Definitely, especially like the idea of, in a sense, acting as a channel to weirder stuff, as a, through referencing it and directing people without necessarily yourself attaching yourself to it. I suppose, so especially within the context of interest in AI risk not being just a side project, but for an academic group specifically focused on it. It is sort of a tricky issue because it seems like there's a certain point where it's strange for to have a group that's in some sense motivated by one problem, but speaking in its papers or publicly about another related problem, which is an aspect of it, but not necessarily the motivating concern. I'm interested whether in your mind you actually advocate or consider an effective strategy being, in a sense, not even sort of in conversation with colleagues, directly saying what the motivating concern is, in a sense, keeping that sort of locked down. Because it definitely seems like there's also some danger in, I don't want to say like quite dishonesty, but I feel like even with effective altruism, just sort of more generally, I feel like there's a sort of phenomenon of it sometimes comes out on, for example, there's the article about, I think EA Global a year ago, where someone attended and wrote a long article about how concerned they were that they heard all this talk about, AI being the most important thing in the world, and the sort of like deep secret of effective altruism that people are concerned about AI. It seems to me that there's some potential danger in sort of going too far with the strategy of not seeing quite what you mean, not seeing quite what you're concerned about. If people were able to, otherwise, or just sort of generally.
So I know what you're saying. So the question that you asked is, if you're really motivated by something, why not say it directly? Is there a danger of not saying it directly? I think I actually don't see too much danger to saying it, to not saying it directly. I think if there are lots of reasons that people are motivated by things that aren't the things that they actually directly express that they're motivated by. This happens all the time. And it's actually quite strategic to not say that you're directly motivated by. I'll give you another example from effective altruism that people don't talk about. So, for example, it's quite well known that aid in response to disasters is much less effective than aid into effective altruist, well-evaluated direct action charities. That there is a sort of an unspoken rule within effective altruism to avoid criticizing such aid, because this will make the effective altruism movement look bad. And they'll make people look heartless and not fair. So people have an unspoken rule about not publicizing this thing. Now, if you're in conversation with someone and you feel like you can trust that person, you can talk about this issue. But if you are writing an article, this is not an article you want to write. That's a dangerous thing to write. In the same way, you have to always think about what your reputation is, and how people will perceive you. How will people perceive you if they know that you're motivated by something that you're talking about at the critical? They will perceive you as the critical. Now, if they don't know that, then they won't perceive you as hypocritical. If they find that out later, well, a lot of people are motivated by different things, and they don't talk about them, and that's fine. So I think it's much more dangerous to actually talk about what they're motivated by than not talk about it. Does that make sense?
I think so. I guess also to skip back a bit to the survey, just as another aspect of it. So the best performing prompt was one which entirely just asked people to sort of think on their own about it. The second best performing one was a prompt which somewhat hard to judge because it had, unlike the fairly simple thing about it, prompt had a number of elements in it, including appeal to credibility. Like that was Stephen Hawking that said this, but it also made an analogy. Sort of prime point of it was it made an analogy to nuclear energy, and it sort of made the somewhat simple appeal of AI as a transformative technology. Good and bad uses. Similar to nuclear energy, we have really strong regulations on nuclear energy because it's so powerful. If AI is even more powerful than nuclear energy, then surely we should need to put resources into investigating its safety and keep it under control. And it also seems like another can't draw too strong of an inference just because number of factors in it. It also seems plausibly another indication that that's another way that you can do inferential steps is this fairly straightforward comparison to already existing technologies, which is taking something that people already thought about, they're very familiar with, nuclear power, nuclear energy. This is something that useful but potentially extremely dangerous. They have stories in their head about Chernobyl and Cold War, nuclear weapon threat and all these things to draw upon. This also seems like potentially another strategy which comes to mind as somewhat effective. So I'd be interested to know whether the method of making analogies to existing potentially dangerous technologies also seems to something to be potentially effective from the inferential steps angle. In comparison to the timeline of, unemployment and things like that angle.
Yeah, I think when talking about that might be helpful for talking about what to do about AI, but not for causing concern, not for inspiring emotions. So, talking about nuclear energy, we can also talk about things that, car regulations on cars. I think that might be more salient. It could be more salient. I don't know. We have to test this. It could be more salient than talking about nuclear energy because nuclear energy is far off, far away from people and their engagement with it, whereas cars, that's more of a regular, everyday topic. Yes, there's a lot of regulation on cars. So AIs would be much more present in people's lives than nuclear energy. So that might be, it might be something like that, like cars or something like that that's more present for people. That might be a better topic to talk about. From a perspective of when to talk about it, I think it's when people already are concerned. It's not something to actually cause people to be concerned. It's further on the steps that you want people to take, because well, you have to first answer the question of why they should care before answering the question what should be done. So that would be my thoughts on that.
Thank you. I should also ask as well, just because so all we've done so far in terms of looking into framings of AI risk so far is just this one, fairly basic, low sample size survey, but we're looking to do potentially more work into figuring out how to effectively raise the topic of AI risk. And so I guess, I was wondering, probably somewhat difficult off the top of your head, but whether you have any sense of what sorts of surveys or experiments or research generally might potentially be useful towards the goal of figuring out the best ways of framing AI risk to people outside of the field. Like what sort of information in your mind would be helpful for illuminating the question?
Sure. So I think what I want to do is see people's actions, people's behaviors. That's the most important thing to do. So a good type of survey that has been done is giving people, let's say, $10 for participating in the survey, then after their participation, offering them an opportunity to donate this money to a certain cause. So what I would love to see was surveys where various types of training around AI safety issues are presented, and then people are offered an opportunity to donate part of the money that they make to AI safety research or ethics or something like that. And that's pretty easily global with psychology students in universities, where these surveys are typically done, or even with mechanical work, all of the money there would be pretty small. People could still somehow, be offered an opportunity to give part of that for the sake of AI safety. So seeing how much money people give back, I think is much more salient than self-reports, because there you're actually seeing people's actions as opposed to just their work.
That's an interesting idea. I can also imagine, for example, though I'm not sure how many people would pick this up, something at the end of a survey where it offers some additional reading on the topic if people found it interesting or important, and seeing how many people actually, click a box which gives them a link to something or something along those lines, even just whether people are interested in looking more into it.
Yeah, I think that's also, I can see that would be good to see whether people take actions to find out more about that. Mm-hmm. That's fine. That would be good. I think the people giving their money is more indicative.
Oh, yes. Yeah. No, I'm sure there's more ways. I'm just in my head thinking also ways to do it without money as well.
Without money, sure. Yes, that would be quite good before, if there's not sufficient money to afford the survey that would cost like money to, then have something like check a box to get more information, and then you can see that, or you can have check a box to subscribe for an email list with more information about this present. So that would be another thing that might be interesting, because then you're actually accomplishing the goal of getting people to sign up for an email list, which that's, I would imagine that would be a nice thing to have.
Yeah, I think I actually, this has been actually extremely helpful. And I think I'm planning writing up also as well notes to circulate among the group. So I just sort of ask as sort of a closing thing, whether there's any particular reading generally, for example, on the idea of inferential steps or persuasion, sort of generally that you think would be particularly good for me or someone in the group to read, or just whether you have any sort of general recommendations of resources for getting a better sense of effective persuasion techniques.
Sure. So for helping persuade people, there's a classic book is Social Influence. So Influence by Cialdini. So not fiction, just Influence by Cialdini. Robert Cialdini. That's a really quite good classic book on persuasion. A good book on telling stories is Lemon Chip Keeps Made to Stick. So I think that would be a good book on both type stories to help people about AI. So it talks about the steps to take, all the steps to take through creating a story. If you want to write about AI and articles about AI, I'd be happy to share the Intentional Insights article guidelines, which we have optimized for communicating science-based information to a broad audience. And this is why our articles appear in places like Time and Psychology Today and some Huffington Post.
That's actually. No, I was just saying it sounds like something it'd be really great if you could send that.
Sure, happy to share it. So yes, then for more broadly, I think looking for readings on content marketing would be very useful. So content marketing is the broader science and practice of how to share and promote ideas to a broad audience most effectively. So Google content marketing, and there's a bunch of resources. I think there's a content marketing institute which has quite good resources and stuff, and yeah, other things.
Oh, yeah, sounds like good stuff. Yeah, so thank you so much. Do you happen to have, there's already a lot, but happen to have any closing thoughts or suggestions that you think that you haven't already shared that you think might be useful for us going forward and thinking more about looking into the issue of effective AI communication?
Yes. So one thing to think about is what actions do you want people to take based on engaging with the topic of AI? And that's not something we'll talk about. So think about specific actions that you want people to take, and then use surveys to test whether, based on certain messages, people will take those actions. Don't trust focus groups. Focus groups are notorious for people saying that they will do certain things and not actually doing it, because they actually engage with their message in a different way than when they're in the focus group, rather than when they are home and they just get exposed to their message by reading a blog or something, or a piece in the newspaper. See what actions people take as a result of engaging with your message. Observe that. See what actually happens. And then perceive based on the action, based on whether people have taken those actions. A good thing to do would be to do A/B testing. So compare, let's say you're doing articles, compare two articles and see what actions people take. Potential action you can see would be having having two articles with two different sets of messages, and then have a link to see whether for people to email their local congressperson about this topic, the concern, and then see which article causes people to email their local congressperson about their concern, and that would be a good way of finding that out of what actually happens with that thing. So this is a real life testing. That's always very important. So figuring that out and adapting the message over time. So let's say you find out that one article, one type of framing is better than another. Then use that framing and do two different versions of that framing, and then see which of those works better for your messaging, and so on. So always optimize your messages and always learn based on how the audience that you're engaging with actually responds to your content, to your ideas, to your framing, to do the actions that you want them to do. And so over time, you'll be able to find out a lot of information, and you'll be able to optimize your messaging in this way. Hope that helps.
Absolutely. Yeah, well, thank you so much. This is, I think a lot of good thoughts and some further stuff for us to think about and look into. Yes, thank you so much for taking the time to talk today.
You're welcome, Ben. And once again, for viewers, this is Intentional Insights videocast. My name is Dr. Sapowski. I'm the president of Intentional Insights, and we focus on spreading rational thinking and effective giving to a broad audience and supporting other folks to do so as well.